Good evening. We've got the diehards, degenerate gamblers, sports bettors, MMA fans. Happy Monday, happy Memorial Day, and welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, your boy Clint. I am rocking the traditional old school logo t-shirt here for you today. I should be wearing the baby blues. We're coming off of a break week, so technically last week was not a winning week for me, so I thought we'd just rock the Die Hard t-shirt. I'm still waiting for my new one to come in the mail here, so looking forward to that. But we're back. We're back. We all survived the break week. We made it through, and we have fights to talk about tonight. I do apologize. The video quality, the audio quality, the internet may dip out a little bit. Your boy is obviously not in his usual setup this week, so had to get a little break from the heat, and I do apologize if the quality dips just a little bit. We'll be back to our normal setup for next week's show, obviously. Welcome into the chat, everybody. Of course, my guy Dream and Mike Harvey battling it out, number one, number two in the chat here today. My guy Mushroom, 5 more sleeps until violence. I can't wait. These break weeks absolutely ruin me. And it kills me because right now we're in the NHL playoffs and I love NHL. You guys know that. I got my degenerate action rocking week in and week out. There's like one game a week on right now. It kills me. There's nothing for me to watch. I need football to come back around. VGO in the house. Bufo on the beat with the mirror on the wall. Who's the hottest MMA pot of them all? That's what's up. Air Dog, my guy, Lou. Okay, you know what? Lou has essentially in the chat spoiled it for everybody that he's looking forward to the pairing of myself and none other than Mike's MMA picks. So without further ado, I might as well just bring in this week's guest. I'm very excited. It's been a long time. Mike and I have been talking on Twitter. We've been kind of trending in the same circles, but never really quite made that connection. You may know him from the MMA Odds Breaker, from the All-Star, none other than Mike's MMA picks. Mike, how you doing today, my guy?
Appreciate you having me on, Clint. Looking forward to breaking down some fights, and happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. Appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't be happier to have you. I'm very much looking forward to this card. Any card they give us coming off of a break week. Like, it could be awful, and I'm just ready to like snatch it up and get everything I can for it. But this one's not half bad. There's some very interesting matchups coming up here, and I think we're going to have fun talking about this one.
100%. And we lost a quality fight off the card a few minutes ago, so we'll chat a bit about that soon as well.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well rip the Band-Aid off here. My guy Saboom and Gaucho in the chat. Guram Scratch sucks. So if you guys have not been on Twitter yet today, we're going to go ahead and ruin it for you. Guram Katutaladze, one of my favorite Georgians, unfortunately had to pull out. It does look like we're going to get a replacement bout, though, so we're not going to lose a fight on the card at this point, to our understanding. We do not know who Jamie Mullarkey will be facing for his fight, though. So I don't know. Mike, your thoughts on the whole situation? Is there anybody you have pegged for maybe who should fill in on short notice?
Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, hopefully it's a lightweight prospect, somebody who made fade in the early rounds, because we know Jamie Mullarkey, he comes with his gas tank, he comes with his chin, and Volkanovski put him out. I'm not sure if they're going to bring in somebody capable of putting Mullarkey out cold. So as long as they add another fight, keep the 13 fights intact, I'll be happy.
So just real quick, we did lose the fight, obviously, but Guram was like a 3-1 favorite. I saw a lot of people parlaying him up. I'll be honest, I was picking him to win, and I kind of was dipping my toe in the parlay waters. Thankfully, I hadn't locked anything in yet. Did you have any thoughts on that matchup initially? Were you going with the favorite, or were you on the dog side of things?
Yeah, I was leaning towards Guram. The thing about Mullarkey, he has to take a lot of punishment to come forward. And is Guram going to be the fighter who's going to empty his tank in there? I don't know. He seems methodical. He's going to throw a lot of body kicks. He's going to wade in and out. And I didn't have any play on that any play on that fight at all. And one thing about, creating these parlays, if you're doing them in advance, you have to be aware that if you do them before weigh-ins, a leg could drop off, and then you have to be content with laying whatever juice that might be on the other legs. So I try to stay away from parlays, but I would have picked Guram to win that fight.
Okay. I was kind of in the same boat. Thankfully, didn't tie up my money on a parlay yet. Hadn't gotten there yet, but can't wait to see who they end up putting in there with Malarkey, because he's got a fun style. As long as they give him somebody who's in any way kind of a banger, we'll still get a good fight out of it, I think. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and dive straight on into this bad boy. It's UFC Vegas 74 this week. We already have 74 live viewers. Thank you for hanging out with us here on Pub Sports Radio on your Memorial Day. I hope you all have a beer in hand or a water. Maybe the hydration is more appropriate for some people, but hope you're all out there having a good time. Maybe had some grilling already done, played some volleyball. Let's talk some fights. Hit the like button for me. The lines, as always, are powered by Superbook Sports. And your first fight of the evening is going to be Maxim Grishin taking on Philipe Lins in what is essentially an old man fight. These guys have too much upside at this point. Neither one is any type of spring chicken here. And both people are on a lot of gamblers' fades list, I want to say. Interesting line here. We've got Philipe Lins, the 115 plus 115 favorite. Maxim Grishin currently the minus 135 favorite. I apologize. Philipe Lins is the plus 115 underdog. If you couldn't tell, it's been a week since I've done a podcast here, people. I'm a little rocky here to start the show. I'll figure it out, though. We'll get there. You guys know me. I have a big giant fade marked on Philipe Lins. I do not like this guy. I don't think he's very good. He's not UFC caliber. He was kind of a bum, came over from the PFL. We were expecting big things out of him after he won the $1 million. He got off his cycle and hasn't been the same since. Currently, however, he is on a 2-fight win streak, and it looks like his doctor got on board. He looked phenomenal in his last couple of fights. Well, phenomenal's maybe a little strong against Marcin Prachnio. He survived. Marcin Prachnio looked okay, got what needed to be done. And then against OSP, round 1 knockout. That's the best he's looked in years. But really, that's kind of what we expect to see from Philipe Lins when he's on his game. He's got fast hands. He's got good boxing. He's got decent power. I will absolutely give him that. But he's got like a 4-minute gas tank. And if he doesn't get you out of there in that first round, he does tend to slow down. He does tend to fade off. I feel like he gets a little predictable in there. The Marcin Prachnio fight, I think Marcin Prachnio has got one of the worst chins we've seen in this weight class in a long time. And he was able to go a full 15 with a tired Philipe Lins. So yes, he lost the fight, but the fact that he survived to the bell, I think anybody who's half their worth should be getting Marcin Prachnio out of there personally. Maxim Grishin on the other side of this coin, he's definitely been around. He's 39 years old, so he's just ever so shy of that 40-year-old mark. 32, 9, and 2. This man's got an absolute ton of experience. The one thing I like to point out with Maxim Grishin is he's huge. Like, he fights at light heavyweight, but this man would not look out of place next to some heavyweights. Absolutely massive man. And in that giant run of fights, he's only got 2 losses by knockout. At light heavyweight, that's saying something. Like, his durability is held up relatively well. We have seen him hurt. We have seen him dropped. He's kind of up and down in the UFC right now, coming off of a win over William Knight, which doesn't impress anybody. But he lost to Marcin Tybura and Dustin Jacoby, both by decision. Again, showing off that legendary durability. Honestly, Mike, I think this one's pretty simple. Philipe Lins is going to have the athleticism advantage, the speed advantage, the power advantage all early. I think he can finish Maxim Grishin potentially in that first round because these are big boys and he can get anybody out of there. If he doesn't, however, I think the cage pushing, the wrestling, the veteran savvy of a guy like Maxim Grishin, who knows how to extend a fight, will eventually take this thing over. This is a live bet after round 1 spot for me, where if Maxim Grishin survives that initial flurry, I think I would probably want to take a plus money flyer on him going into round 2 after he's given up that first round and expect him to find his way back into the fight. I'm going to pick Maxim Grishin to get the win, but it's one of those spots where I'm not betting it pre-flop because I know he can get nuked in round 1, and Philipe Lins as a dog could look like a minus 500 favorite when in fact I think the pick'em price tag is probably more appropriate.
Yeah, this is a fascinating bout where you have two old war horses who are coming to the end of their road, to be honest. You have Grishin, who's 39 years of age. He has a lot of miles on him, and the William Knight fight, I was honestly impressed how he was able to shuck Knight off at times, and that was a big boy who came in at, I believe, 218 pounds when he weighed in. It was supposed to be a light heavyweight bout, and then on the other side of the fight, you have Lins, who he landed that left hand early on OSP, and that was all she wrote. Basically, there was no coming back for the carcass of OSP. And this matchup, I got to mention this. We have 19 out of 26 fighters on this card who are at least 30 years of age, and these two fighters are well beyond those years. Lins also, OSP fight, you noticed on the scales, he looked like he was rejuvenated, rehabilitated, reinvigorated, and maybe he could potentially end up in the victory circle here after he takes on Grishin. Grishin, now, it's interesting. He's a big guy who's fought at heavyweight. He fought Tybura at heavyweight, but he only weighed in at 223 pounds or so. So this is a really interesting fight for me to break down. I understand why the odds are fairly close. At one point in time, Lins could have been had for plus 145, plus 150-ish. So I think that folks who got in on Lins early, they may have an edge. But then I have to walk this back, though, because you watch the Tanner Boser fight, and it only took 1 or 2 shots. And then Boser flatlined Lins real quick. So I'm leaning towards Lins here. I have no action on the bout. I would lean towards the fight doesn't go the distance line, which hasn't been released at all books, but I saw it's hovering around even money at this stage in their respective careers in the smaller octagon. Just something to consider. But I understand where you're coming from the live betting perspective. Lins traditionally has struggled with the gas tank, especially. I mean, he was huffing and puffing against Prachnio, right? So I have no action on this bout, but I understand why folks are picking Lins.
Yeah, that's it really is one that I think you could make a strong argument for either way. At the end of the day, though, it's again, not to be disrespectful of the fighters, you guys know, doing everything here with an edge of comedy. It's a bum fight. You know what I mean? It's a low-level heavyweight fight. These guys are both very old. It could turn into, leaning up against the cage, both guys huffing and puffing about 7-8 minutes in, and then nobody gets knocked out. It's a split decision. Like, that's entirely possible here in this spot. So yeah, not one I want a big investment on. Definitely looking live. Maybe the round 3 sprinkle for my guy, Maxim Grishin. I'm going to say Max by decision, but you never know. I just trust the gas tank. As long as he can get out of that first round, I think Max should be okay. We'll see, though. Very intriguing fight to kick off our night here. First off, got to shout out. Thank you for the donation, Swiss Horton, so much for the $5, helping us keep the lights on, asking if Mike has Kama Sutra illustrations behind him.
We've got some mixed martial arts taking place behind me, my brothers.
Some good old ground and pound going on back there. So nothing to worry about. It's okay. PG-13 show here. Bring your kids. All right. Next up, we have... And I do apologize. Like I said, folks, I'm out of town. So I meant to go hard earlier and pre-plan, the sexy tiles for you guys. It just didn't happen. Your boy was on vacation mode a little early. Luan Lacerda is taking on Damon Blackshear. And I love this fight, Mike. I really, really love this fight. It's kind of looking like a bit of a grappler's delight here in this spot. Damon Blackshear is a fighter who I've been very intrigued by so far in his UFC run. I think I bet on him so far already once or twice, and it's been a rough go. 0-1-1 here in the UFC, but he came in short notice for his debut, and then the UFC basically used him as cannon fodder for one of my favorite prospects in Farid Basharat. Now, that was the one, and actually, now that I say that, I'm I'm 1-0-1 betting on Blackshear because I did bet Farid Basharat in that spot. I did back him against Zalal, and that was the draw where he came in on short notice and actually looked pretty impressive for a guy that came in on short notice. Ran out of gas, pushed a tough pace, got out of there with a draw. You can't knock him too hard for that. This is a fight where he actually has a decent opponent, however. His opponent, Luan Lacerda, 12-2. For those of you who don't recall, also came into the UFC against maybe somebody a little punching up a little uphill against Cody Stamann for his first fight. He keeps a very, very tall Muay Thai kicking style striking, plodding, heavy on his feet, walks his opponents down, hard chopping leg kicks, which you love to see. He's also a high-level BJJ black belt, 10 wins by sub, and that's really kind of the key here. These two guys, we either expect to see a low-level kickboxing match because both of them are primary grapplers, or we're going to get some serious scrambles. Cody Stamann in that fight went 0-2 on takedowns on Luan Lacerda, which I think is pretty impressive. You know, for a guy who's a BJJ base, we see these guys fall to their back, look for the guillotine, you know, a lot of that kind of thing going on. So the fact that Lacerda was cognizant enough to try to defend those takedowns and keep it standing against someone like Cody Stamann, I think actually is a good sign for him. Damon Blackshear, however, he's got really sneaky back takes, strong body lock. He'll do whatever it takes to drag you down to the control, drag you down to the mat. Sorry about that. He will ride that back. He will absolutely get that body lock and just hold an entire round and kill the clock. Every once in a while, he's a little over aggressive on his attacks. He will go submission over position, lose the spot, and then kind of have to fight his way back into it. Very aggressive, very active, which you love to see, except that if he ends up on bottom of another black belt like Luan Lacerda, that could be a bit of an issue for him where he potentially can't work his way back up to the feet right away, loses some time on the ground, or potentially even puts himself in a bad spot. This is a very, very tightly lined fight. Luan Lacerda is a minus 140 favorite. Damon Blackshear plus 120 over on Superbook Sports. And I think Luan has a pretty clear striking advantage on the feet. But I also think Damon has maybe been a little undersold here in this spot because of the 1-1 run so far in the UFC. And this is a fight where if he gets it down to the ground and has the control grappling, he may be able to pull this off, whether it's by sub, which I'm not necessarily counting on, but obviously it's a path to victory, or grinding out a decision. I think it's live. I kind of lean with Damon Blackshear as a dog. I do not have a bet at this point in time on this fight. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, Mike. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, this could potentially be a grappler's delight. You watch both of these competitors, and both of them faced legitimate top-tier competition last time out. I mean, the Cody Stamann matchup for Lacerda, he was the one landing the takedowns, right? Late in the fight. The third round, that was very, very impressive on Cody Stamann. And he had that fight it was within his grasp late. My heart goes out to anyone who is holding those Lacerda tickets. And then you look at the Basharat Blackshear matchup, and Blackshear is a fighter who you cannot count out. Watch the Yusuf Zalal fight back, and he's somebody who comes on strong late in the fight. Imagine if he had 5 more seconds in the Basharat fight to lock up that triangle. He was pretty darn close to doing it. Yeah, so this is a very closely lined fight for a reason. You look at the odds right now. I saw Blackshear around plus 125, plus 128 or so. So the odds continue to marinate as we get closer to fight night, and I'm keeping an eye on this. I do honestly lean towards the Blackshear side of things. I know he fights out of Jackson Wink, and then you have Lacerda, who's a Nova União fighter. So my heart is torn. My mind says that Blackshear, the value is on him right now. And I'll be interested to see how this plays out as we get closer to fight night. I have no action on this bout, but also as far as the grappling goes, you see a lot of heel hooks, a lot of chokes, an armbar submission on Lacerda's come up, and LFA, he looks the part, and he looked pretty good on the feet against Stamann, but I mean, that was in the third round. And we have to mention that Stamann, if you watched his pre-fight interview and his most recent, bout, he complained that he had to cut a ton of weight for the Lacerda fight in Rio, and they didn't have the amenities necessary for him to cut the weight properly. So I do understand how he gassed out, and he definitely did gas out in that third round, no doubt. I think I was at Borgata in New Jersey watching that fight unfold, and I wasn't holding the ticket, but I was rooting for those folks with the Lacerda ticket. This particular bout, you also, Clint, when I looked up and down this resume of each fighter, I saw that only one of them, I believe Lacerda's been finished once by submission. No one that Blackshear hasn't. So you got to wonder, is the submission defense on par, or have they just not faced proficient grapplers? So I'm hesitant to go with the fight doesn't go the distance prop. Perhaps they have. We'll talk about Kai Kara France later on in the card about submission defense, etc. But here in this spot, I'm leaning towards Blackshear, and I think that his cardio could pay dividends here. I also, one thing must mention is that Lacerda's fight that took place in Rio, so he had his home crowd behind him. Everybody was pulling for him, and here he's going to be in the smaller octagon in Las Vegas, and I think that also may help out Blackshear here. So the pick for me is going to be Blackshear.
That is a very valid point. Blackshear is relentless with those forward pressure style takedowns, gets his opponent on the back foot, grabs the body lock. And that small cage is going to make a difference. You know, if you're constantly going after your opponent, pinning them up against that fence, that's the kind of thing that will absolutely wear on a fighter. And you know what? One thing, Mike, that I kind of wanted to mention, and now that you're talking about the small cage, I definitely think Luan Lacerda has slightly suspect cardio. It's a little too early in his career for me to be like marking him as a gas bag or talking about how he can't push a pace or things like that. But in that Cody Stamann fight, he looked tired towards the end of the second round and then the third round. And of course, it's a 15-minute martial arts fight. These guys are going to get tired. But he was doing a whole lot of striking, only defended 2 takedowns, and he was breathing heavily in that fight. Now, imagine you put a pace on the guy. Imagine you force him against the cage. You make him clinch. You make him grapple. You get him to the ground once or twice and then get him back up. I love targeting gassy fighters with submission props. And Levy Whitebull is not the first person to stick this in here, I don't think, but the 13-1 sub prop on Damon Blackshear is extremely intriguing to me. You've got 2 high-level grapplers, one guy who's wrestling I trust, offensively speaking, a little bit more, one guy whose cardio I absolutely trust a little bit more. And you mentioned to yourself, I love the Basharat Bros. He maybe needed 10 seconds, and he might have won an Anderson Silva Chael Sonnen style comeback in his last fight over a prospect that we are all head over heels for. Yeah, I'm definitely on the Damon Blackshear side, and I think I might be tasting that 13-1 by sub just for a shot. I might have to do it. And this right here, folks, this right here, you guys know the deal, right? I love bringing guests on the show. I bring on people who are a lot better at gambling, a lot smarter than myself, and we talk things through, and every once in a while, the light just dings on live with a guest. So Mike is doing the Lord's work over here, helping me talk through these fights, and no matter what I end up doing, I'll obviously tell you guys what I'm going to bet, but use the information, come to your own conclusions, make your own decisions, and pull the trigger on bets that you feel most comfortable with, and always gamble safely and responsibly. Next up, we're going to talk about Jinh Frey taking on Elise Reed. And I'm so irritated. I'm so frustrated with this fight because I thought I was going to come on the show and it's going to be Monday. I'm on my podcast and everybody knows I fall in love with these scrappy underdog prospects. You know, Sam Hughes is my girl. Chase Hooper is the guy I'm just taking the bag every single time he fights. And people are like, oh, you're so insane for taking these prospects that nobody likes. And you find these ways to bet them. And then, yeah, I got a decent little hit rate on them. I was planning on coming in here and talking up Elise Reed. I was planning on coming in here and talking about how she's underrated and, you know, everyone's not ready for, you know, the evolution of Elise Reed. And she's a much better striker than people give her credit for. And she actually has decent power at this weight class for, you know, women's MMA. She hurts people on the feet. And then I see all over Twitter Elise Reed, Elise Reed, Elise Reed, Elise, and I'm like, damn it, oh no, if this is the square side favorite for the week at -130, that is terrifying to me because I'm used to being on an island, Mike. I'm not used to people agreeing with me. I'm not used to having people in the crazy boat with me. I prefer having personal space and some leg room when I'm the person driving the crazy train. I kind of lean to Elise Reed here in this fight, and that's mostly because Jinh Frey is a little bit ageist here, but she's older. We know these fighters fall off after a while. She's on a 2-fight skid. She's 11-8 overall. She's a natural atom weight who's fighting up a weight class technically here at the UFC. She's piled on muscle. So she works in the weight class that the UFC has available here for these ladies. But her last couple fights, man, I mean, she beat Gloria DePaula and Ashley Yoder, which frankly nobody should be impressed by. And then she lost to Vanessa Demopoulos. It was a split. It was a close fight. It was tough. Like, you can't take much away from her there, but she got starched, absolutely starched by Polyana Viana. And she was hurt in several of her last couple of fights. I've been talking about Jinh Frey's fight IQ, the decision-making, and her failing chin in basically every single fight breakdown that I've done of hers in the last couple of times. And I feel like this is a spot where people would be underestimating Elise Reed. It's apparently not. My problem with Elise Reed and why I feel like this fight is lined as closely as it is she has zero ability to grapple. None whatsoever. And I would love to sit here and go, guys, I have faith that Elise Reed has developed a stand-up game. I have faith that Elise Reed has worked her hips and now she can stop double legs and she's going to just bop this girl up on the feet. And even if the game plan is for Jinh Frey to come in and shoot takedowns, which frankly it always is. You go back and you run the tape on, I believe it was the Vanessa Demopoulos fight where her corner is just screaming at her to shoot takedowns. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was the Gloria DePaula fight. I think she shot 2 takedowns. She got them both because Gloria also cannot stuff takedowns. But she only shot 2 takedowns when her corner is like raging at her to shoot and spam takedowns because they know that's her path to victory. She just doesn't do it, Mike. So I think the low fight IQ of Jinh Frey could leave this fight standing. If Jinh Frey decides to grapple, I don't see how Elise Reed gets up. She's one of these fighters that attacks with elbows rather than fishing for underhooks, rather than getting her hips back. So she always ends up on bottom, and then she's got to try to work her way up from there, which she frankly does not do very well. So I'm picking Elise Reed. I actually think she has a shot to knock out Jinh Frey, and this could just be the retirement fight for Frey. So I haven't bet it yet. I'm tempted to go ahead and bet Reed. I am a little nervous that everyone on a Pick'em women's MMA fight is all piling in on the same side. But that's the side that I am picking. The reason I'm not betting it is because she could get taken down twice, and that could be the whole fight. So right now it's a pass. We'll see if I get there before fight time. Would love to hear your thoughts here, Mike.
Sure. If you check the Instagram, guess who received her brown belt recently?
Yes.
That would be Jinh Frey. This is what Clint Sumray referred to as steering into the variance. And you also may hear people say, scared money don't make money, right? So this is one of those fights. You got low-level women's mixed martial arts. You have volatility at stake, but then you also have a closely lined fight. And that should be mentioned. Corey McKenna was an opponent of, I believe, Elise Reed at one point in time, and she overcame the grappling in that specific bout. Granted, some of the judges that was speculative judging to say the least there. This specific bout, when you look at what's at stake, also the age of Jinh Frey, 38 years of age, you don't see Holly Holm, etc. There are only a few fighters who are continuing their respective mixed martial arts careers at this stage. And she's coming off of being brutally knocked out, I believe, by Polyana Viana, right? So, and then Vanessa Demopoulos was getting the better of her at certain points. So the one thing I will say, and I've watched obviously a lot of women's mixed martial arts throughout my handicapping career, is there are times when things happen behind the scenes and camp changes. You find a new wrinkle in your game, but do you find that at 38 years of age? I beg
Not
to
often.
differ. No, yeah, I don't think so. So I understand folks being on the Elise Reed side, and I would be on that side as well. But I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't be betting low-level women's mixed martial arts fights, and it's paid dividends. I've been doing well. With that being said, I remember, there was a fight. I have to get this off my chest. The Betch Correa Sajara Eubanks fight. That fight really that was the last time I think I made I risked significant units, and that came back to bite me in the ass, and I still feel that burn today. So even this year, 2023, the most I've ever risked on anything in 2023 is 2.5 units on a play. So I keep it light, but here I would, if I were folks in general, I think that Elise Reed at -130 or so is a decent bet. Not making the play myself, just because of the promise to myself. But I understand where you're coming from, Clint.
That's definitely the side that I'm looking at. I'm expecting, if any improvements do come from a side here, it would be the Elise Reed side of things. The problem with that is that, you mentioned the Instagram stalking, and we found out that Jinh Frey did get her brown belt, which congratulations to her. That's a massive achievement. Again, you've got to actually be able to get the fight to the ground to use that brown belt. Who knows if she'll shoot for those takedowns, etc. The thing for me is Elise Reed is now the owner of her own gym. And you see all the stuff that she's posting on her Instagram is her by herself. She's showing, pictures of the track. She's showing pictures of herself with the bag. And I'm going, if you had just like one picture with a decent grappler in your weight class, I would be all about it. I'd be like, okay, like we're working on takedown defense here, and I'm there. I'm ready. But she's just running. And that's not going to improve your hips. That's not going to improve your ability to sprawl or scramble or get back to the cage. So I have enough questions. I'm with you. The low-level women's MMA is scaring me here. I'll pick Elise Reed. We'll see. And just want to say what's up to Lou. Thank you very much for joining the chat, my friend. My favorite troll on Twitter. He never, ever, Mike, he never misses an opportunity to remind my guy Lucrative MMA that I compared him to Mr. Punchable Face himself. Done very accidentally live on the show, by the way. And Lou makes sure that Lucrative will never forget that moment. So Lou, appreciate you being here, buddy. Next up, we've got Daniel Santos taking on Johnny Munoz Jr. And I'm a little irritated about this fight as well, Mike. The reason for that is that I like Daniel Santos. This is a rebooked fight. They put this one back together, moved it a couple weeks down the road. And you know what the bookies do. They're not giving away free money. They're never going to give you an opportunity to get one over on them. Daniel Santos, if memory serves, was a -150-ish in that ballpark the last time this was booked. And a lot of us Twitter gamblers were on this man in that fight. A lot of us had the same thought process of how this is going to play out. He comes back and opens as a -190, -200 instead. We are being taxed by the bookies for this fight to have been rebooked. But honestly, my opinion of it has not changed whatsoever. I really like Johnny Munoz. I'm a big fan of his. I like his style. Good footwork, very elusive, excellent head movement, uses that range well, a very long technical jab. He will have a 4-inch reach advantage, which I think should serve him some here in this spot. But his opponent, Daniel Santos, is relentless. This man does nothing but continued forward pressure. He's 1-1 here in the UFC. He dropped his debut to Arce, which nobody can blame him for that whatsoever. But that marauding forward pressure, the shots that he took in those last couple of fights, I mean, he should have been dead on arrival multiple times, and just kid does not stop. He's made out of pure steel, and that just breaks people. Over the course of the fight, constantly running, constantly moving backwards, it eventually gets to you, and he is a high caliber finisher. As soon as he touches you, whether it's by submission or whether it's with his hands, he will find a way to hurt you and put you down. And I think that's going to be kind of how this fight plays out as well. You know, the way he got Castaneda in his second UFC fight, I think he does the same thing here to Johnny Munoz. Johnny will be slicker. Johnny will be faster. Johnny will be more technical. That's only going to last for the first round or two while he's fresh. And then I think Daniel Santos finds him in the second or the third round. So I'm still picking Daniel Santos. I'm not changing that, even though the price is a little worse. What about you, Mike?
The concern of mine is when you look at why that first fight was canceled, it was because Santos pulled out via injury. So that's something that I need to mention. I echo your sentiment. In fact, I think back to other fighters who take 3 to give 1, take 4 to give 1, and he's one of those fighters. And the first fight of his UFC career, he took on Julio Arce, who is a Golden Gloves boxer, if I'm not mistaken, and he's a solid fighter, out of Tiger Schulman's, who is he hits the target and he's very accurate. And Daniel Santos can be had on the feet. And Johnny Munoz, I was listening to his pre-fight interviews, I believe, with John Coe. By the way, props to John Coe at the All-Star, who does phenomenal work with his interviews on a regular basis. So Johnny Munoz was saying in his pre-fight interviews that he's expecting Daniel Santos to just come towards him and that he's going to tee off on him. And I could see that happening, but does he have what it takes to put him out? That is questionable. I'm not sure if he does. I also think back to fighters like Justin Gaethje and others who, that's how they thrive, is their opponents wilting after they realize that now they're demoralized. They've already emptied their tank and they have nothing left, and their opponent's still standing right there in front of them. And that's what's going to happen here with Daniel Santos if he doesn't get clipped, So I am leaning, and I want to see where this line goes, because I have a feeling that some folks have taken it into consideration that Santos did pull out via the first fight due to injury. And that was only about a month and a half ago, 2 months. So it hasn't been that long. I wonder what injury it was. If anybody in the chat can let us know, that may be helpful. If it was a wrist or a rib, an illness.
Mushroom is saying it was an illness.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting. I mean, if it was rib or a back or something like that, that would be concerning for me. But then they also have to get cleared by the medical team too. So, and we've seen folks get by that medical team without being caught. So the pick for me is going to be Santos. I do think that this being inside of the smaller octagon is also going to help Santos a little bit more. I know that Munoz
room to run for sure.
The Nate Maness fight, right? Yeah. You talk about marauding pressure and basically breaking someone as it becomes a war of attrition. And that's usually what happens when Daniel Santos fights. And that's aesthetically pleasing as a viewer, someone who has money on the line, knowing that somebody's got a great gas tank and a chin that's going to hold up, and also knowing that they are going to try with every fiber of their being to cash that ticket for you. And it looks like Daniel Santos is that guy, to be honest. I was hoping for a better number than -195. I think that's one of the best lines I see currently available, but he's going to be the pick. And it's just a matter of, does he get it done inside the distance? Because I know against, was it Castaneda last time out, he was getting lit up at times on the feet, but Castaneda just couldn't finish the job. And then look what happened. It was like, boom, it's my turn now.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Santos. So Santos is going to be the pick. But again, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Charles Oliveira here. Is Oliveira going to be in his corner for this fight? And if he is, if the blonde hair is in effect too, then I may make a play on the bat. But I'll be picking Santos, and I think that he does win this fight.
Yeah, Santos was the other leg I was looking at to pair up with Guram for about even money. I liked the Guram-Santos combo, and that was this close to being my first bet of the entire card. I may have to get a little bit more creative now and do something else with Santos, perhaps an inside the distance or a round 2, round 3 type of sprinkle or something like that, because we have seen Johnny Munoz hurt before. We have seen him knocked out. We've seen him finished. So I definitely think that inside the distance upside is there. The one thing, though, that I do always like to point out for the kids at home is whenever you've got a fighter who follows a pattern, we've got Johnny Munoz, who is alternating wins and losses. Win, loss, currently off a win over Ludwig Schalinian. So if history is to repeat itself here, Johnny Munoz is headed for an L against Wiley Cat on Saturday. So we'll see what happens, everybody. All right, we got 107 live viewers. I'm joined by my guy Mike's MMA picks to talk about UFC Vegas 74. Thank you all so much for being here. Do me a favor, hit the like button, and let's keep the show rolling. Next up, we got Andrei Arlovski taking on Don'Tale Mayes. Oh, God, here we go again. Don'Tale Mayes. Mike, I started writing notes down for this one when I was doing my study, and then I went, you know what? What's the point? Because Andrei Arlovski has been around for so long. We've broken down so many of his fights. The man is over 40, I believe 44 years old officially. I mean, Andrei Arlovski is Andrei Arlovski. We talked about how fighters over the age of 36 aren't generally improving in many areas. And in fact, we've seen Andrei almost exposed when it comes to his grappling. Very recently, he's not getting better. He's fading. And his opponent, Don'Tale Mayes, who gave us just the absolute biggest kick in the shorts when he fought Hamdi that one time, when all of MMA Twitter lost money on him because Hamdi was juiced to the gills and managed to fight his way to a draw in a spot where he probably shouldn't have survived. And then he goes out and lays an egg against Augusto Sakai. I mean, that was maybe a spot where he was just on the wrong side of the athleticism page. But here we get a potentially retiring Andrei Arlovski versus Don'Tale Mayes. Neither guy really improving, neither guy really changing. I mentioned this to you backstage before the show, Mike. I was high on Don'Tale Mayes, higher than most. I think he's got a strong physical nature about him, and I felt like that would carry him. If he got the skills to go with that body, I felt like he could actually be a force here in the heavyweight division. The problem is he has not made any adjustments. The Augusto Sakai fight had me ripping my beard hair out because he's flipping out these little weak calf kicks from distance against Augusto Sakai. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, that's either a bad bet or a bad strategy in this case, or you just don't have another option. You don't have another weapon in this spot. And you should by now. You absolutely should by now. I hate it, Mike, because everything in my brain screams at me that this is the spot where you fade the guy who's probably retiring in Andrei Arlovski. Don'Tale Mayes is a minus 125 favorite. He is 31 years old. So he is under that, the 8-year age gap where the victory rate just skyrockets. He definitely is the much younger fighter, the much fresher fighter. At this stage of his career, he's got to hit harder than Arlovski. We've seen that Arlovski's takedown defense and counter grappling is not what it used to be. If Don'Tale decides to wrestle, I think he should be able to get Arlovski down. I'm picking Don'Tale Mayes, and I feel extremely called out because somebody on Twitter this week called that I was going to be betting Don'Tale Mayes like pre-show, and they're probably right. I probably will in some way find a way to burn money on Don'Tale Mayes again this week because I just can't make much of a case for Andrei Arlovski. His best wins recently, and this is where you might just want to blindly fire on the split decision prop because he was on a 4-fight win streak that got snapped by De Lima. Jake Collier, split. Jared Vanderaa, split. He beat Carlos Philipe. I think that probably went the wrong way. And then the fight with Chase Sherman. So he's been progressively slowing down, progressively getting worse. Jake Collier is barely treading water at this point in his career. Jared Vanderaa just got cut by the UFC, which frankly, I'm surprised he was still on the roster for that long. Philippe's been cut for some time. Chase Sherman has also been cut. These are the guys he's squeezing by. If Don'Tale Mayes has any future in the UFC whatsoever, he should beat Andrei Arlovski in this last fight, Mike. So I think that's the side I got to go with.
Okay. Well, man, it's one of those things where you realize, everyone realizes that Arlovski's 44, right? That he started off his professional mixed martial arts career in 1996 and was brutally knocked out by Dotzik. I recommend folks go back and watch that fight. And it's amazing how he's like a phoenix, risen many, many times, again and again and again, almost like Alistair Overeem in a way. And I believe he was put out by Alistair Overeem a few years ago as well. So Don'Tale Mayes, what can you say about him? The fight IQ is a real issue. We saw against Parisian how he was able to implement a grappling heavy approach that really paid dividends there, but can he find the hips of Arlovski here in the smaller octagon. I mean, they're giving him a premium matchup here. This is, I mean, what could you ask for? If you're Mays, what do you want? An aging heavyweight veteran on his last legs. He's been finished recently. He's what does he have to fight for right now? He's fights out of a great team at ATT. You've got the legacy to speak of, but he's 44 years old. But I still see Arlovski pulling out a split decision win. I've been burned in the past. I remember the Bozer fights and other ones. Oh man, I can't lay money on Arlovski, even at this stage in his career. I can't lay money on Mays too. The way he's performed against Sakai to just get obliterated. I know that I remember tweeting this out that it looked like Augusto Sakai was struggling to just get through life. He looked like he was struggling, ambulating and just walking around, but they fight out of the same camp, I believe. So man, in this specific bout, as much as it pains me, I'm going to be picking Arlovski to win, but I would not trust him with my money. I am not making a play on this bout. I believe I profess my mantra is pick your spots, and this is definitely not one of them. So my heart goes out to anybody who has a play on this. I'll be pulling for you. I hope your ticket cashes. I'm going to put that right out there. But I struggle here. Clint. I hear where you're coming from. I'm going to be picking Arlovski, but I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole.
You, Mike, are a more intelligent and stronger man than I. Mike very much preaches pick your spots. And you guys know I've been trying to do that more this year, but I'm also a dumpster diving degenerate at the end of the day. So I may end up with a bet on Don'Tale Mays again and just praying that he doesn't hurt me. I am the guy that crawls back to his ex-girlfriend and just prays that she's faithful this time again, because that's the kind of pain I put myself through with Don'Tale Mays. We do have, let's see here, Evan saying can never bet Mays after the stunt he pulled against Hamdi. And I agree with you, Evan. The only thing is Hamdi popped for everything right after that fight. So remember in round 2, when all of us went, Don'Tale Mays has got this guy out of here. He's on skates. He's out cold. It's happening. And then he magically recovered. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking maybe the juice had a little something to do with that. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening here. All right. Moving right along. Next up, we've got John Sexy Mexi Castaneda taking on short notice replacement Muin Gafurov. And if you guys remember the name Gafurov, you're not crazy. You're not going insane. You do remember that name. He was on Dana White's Contender Series, and that's where you know Muin Gafurov from. Now, I had to go back in and do a little digging there on that one because you guys know I didn't take Contender seriously until maybe like this last round of Contender Series. Sometimes I just don't have the time with the show on Monday and then Contender being on Tuesday. But I remembered Muin, and I was like, why do I remember this guy? Oh, yeah. This is the guy that got dropped horrifically by Chad and Hellinger in the first round on Dana White's Contender Series. That's not something I think you want to write home about. That does not get me excited about the prospect of Muin Gafurov. He's 18-4, but you know what? He took that split decision loss to Chad and Hellinger on Dana White's Contender Series, and he went off and rattled off 2 KO finishes on the regional scene. So he's earned this shot, Mike. Muin Gafurov absolutely has earned the chance to come into the UFC because he very well could have gotten the nod in that Dana White's Contender Series fight. So let's give the kid a shot. He loads up big explosive punches, clubbing overhand right. Everything is really kind of designed to pin you up against the fence, get into that body lock position, and then drag you to the ground. He's got good timing on his blast double legs, but he loves his spinning heel kick, Mike. In fact, his last win was a spinning heel kick to the body that TKO'd his opponent. He throws that thing like 3 or 4 times every single damn fight that he's in. And I think fighters that are of a higher caliber will see that thing coming a mile away and make him pay for it if he keeps doing it without setting it up. John Castaneda, you guys know I love me some Sexy Mexi. This kid's hands are smooth. He's got strong body kicks. He likes to work the body of his opponents. I love his teep kick, that digging up the middle front kick. Lots of side-to-side movement, nice timing anytime he decides to change levels and go for the grappling as well. And he usually plays very well at space. He's one of these guys that controls the range very, very well, usually has a reach advantage, knows how to put it to work. He will have a 3-inch reach advantage here in this spot. And the one thing I love most about Sexy Mexi Mike is that head kick. That thing comes out of nowhere. And that's the one we're talking about. Daniel Santos, he could have been a corpse in round 1 when he ate that thing. The head kick of John Castaneda is filthy. Lesser men would have been ended in that spot. The problem I have with him is I do question, what happened in that Daniel Santos fight. He's got a little bit of that ability to crack. He's got that a little bit ability to get dragged deep and get worked and then fall apart. He's got 2 losses by knockout. I think John Castaneda is the rightful favorite in this spot. He should be able to get by Muin Gafurov, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was just too much for Muin to handle, maybe even got a finish when he makes one of those mistakes, if he's not coming in super sharp because of the short notice replacement. But man, I don't want to lay a whole bunch of chalk on John Castaneda to find out. I think I'd be more interested in violence in this spot. I actually might like an under because I know John can finish. Absolutely know he can. But I've also seen him get knocked out. And that's the one thing Muin does is he'll just keep coming forward and keep swinging that bat with his overhand right, looking for the knockout blow. Right now, it looks like, where is Sexy Maxi? Oh, you know what? I don't think I have a line yet for this one because of the short notice replacement here. So I guess we're just going to have to sit tight on that one. I don't have odds for you guys at the moment. Mike, what do you think about this matchup?
I believe Castaneda is a slight favorite right now. If you check fightodds.io, by the way, best fight odds, I know that they have since things have been changing sporadically throughout the community.
Yeah.
In this spot, you have Gafurov, who's coming in on a short notice replacement route, which is interesting. You watch that Angeliger matchup, and Gafurov was minus 450 in that spot. So we need to cut this guy a little bit of slack. He's extremely talented. If you fight on one in the promotion, he took on John Lineker. He's fought others who are legitimate fighters, and he lost via unanimous decision, but nothing to shake a stick at. I'm not upset with him in that regard, and Helger lost. That could have gone either way, to be honest. And the way he was able to right the ship and also get that body lock in after he was able to wrap it up. He almost submitted Angeliger at one point. And in this spot, I think this is potentially a get right spot at plus money. If you're looking at Gafurov here, my only concern is the short notice issue. You got to wonder, is he ready for this? I have no money on this bout, but I'm waiting for the line to open up at multiple books to keep an eye out for what's available. And there's no doubt, you watch the fluidity on the feet, and Gafurov has it. The other thing, Castaneda, yes, you're right. When you mentioned that he has a willingness to quit, or maybe an unwillingness to quit, but it's exploitable. And it's something that's happened in the past. I don't know if a short notice replacement like Gafurov is going to be able to push that kind of pace early, but I will say this, that one of the ways you can beat an opponent and confuse them is if you come out of the gates like hell on fire and like hell on wheels. And if Gafurov does that, he has the skills. I've seen it through the tape. The guy is extremely talented. There's a reason that he came in as a minus 450 betting favorite against Angeliger. He's got talent both on the feet and on the mat. So if I was Gafurov, I would come out of the gate hot. And then did you mention that you're leaning towards violence in this specific matchup? Because
I am.
I do see that this fight potentially may not go the distance. I would keep an eye out for that fight doesn't go the distance prop if I was to play anything. And the other thing is Castaneda, last time out, he fought Santos, right? And I remember listening to the pre-fight interviews where he specifically spoke about using his grappling as an edge here, as a weapon, his cardio as a weapon. And guess what? Against Santos, it got turned against him, and he was the one who ended up getting finished. So I have no play on this bout. Honestly, I have no plays on any of the fights right now, but trust that I will at some point in the very near future. And man, it depends on the line that you're giving me for Gafurov, because I know how talented he is, and if you're telling me that he's a significant underdog, I'm saying plus 150 or higher, then I may be pulling the trigger. And I don't play underdogs that often. There's a reason that I've been cashing tickets I have well over 1,000 track bets at my betmma.tips third-party track profile, and I'm cashing them at 62% overall, dating back to 2016 or 2017. So I am tempted if you give me Gafurov as an underdog here, but no play on this bout. No play for me yet.
I'm right there with you, Mike. I'm right there with you. I could see Muin Gafurov landing that big shot. He could absolutely knock out my guy Castaneda. Unfortunately, I like the kid. I want to root for him. That's the side I want to be on. I just don't think I can in this particular spot. And especially with Gafurov rattling off 2 knockout wins, he's going to be sky high as far as his confidence goes, riding into this fight, trusting himself, trusting that power. It looks like now Best Fight Odds does not have anything up yet, but I found it on fightodds.com. Very similar, different site. They seem to be a little better at the moment, unfortunately, than Best Fight Odds is. But Castaneda, now you're gonna be sick hearing this, my guy, because Gafurov opened up as a plus 285 underdog.
Wow.
He sits currently as a plus 120 underdog. So that line got smoked by anybody who knew what they were looking at.
Thank you, Clint.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we'll both cry just a little bit. I'm actually very tempted here at any plus money on Muin Gafurov. I will be more tempted, I think, in the violence, because I do think either guy can finish. And then, like I said, I think I'm kind of going to look and see what that knockout line looks like for Gafurov, because we've just seen Castaneda get nuked a couple of times. I could see that overhand right landing at some point in the second or the third round in this fight. So it seems like we line up at least a little bit here on this one, Mike. Definitely nothing to write home about. Not a lock of the week or anything like that. But I do think Muin is very, very live at an underdog price tag. All right. Next fight on the docket, we've got Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Abubakar Nurmagomedov. You guys try to say that 10 times fast. Holy cow. What a mouthful between these two guys. Elizeu Zaleski, I'm shocked that we haven't seen him in action in however long it's been. The man's 36 years old, and the last time we saw him was when that ref was ready to let my boy Benoit Saint-Denis die in the cage. Saint-Denis fought twice since then. Where has Elizeu been? Like, I know he's 36 years old, but you would expect him to get in there at least a little bit quicker than the man who nearly died on the canvas. He came out of that thing just fine, unless his hands had to heal up. This guy's got nasty one-shot KO power, very flowing striking from the outside, big, heavy kicks. He likes to target the legs and the ribs. Very underrated grappler. He's only got, I believe, 2 wins by submission, 14 by KO, it looks like. And when you see this guy grapple, he's got a really tight rear naked choke. We haven't seen it since the Millender fight, but in that fight, the mount transition, Mike, was glorious. It was a beautiful thing to see. And he abandoned that position immediately. And then when they got into their next scramble, he took the back so fluidly and then tapped the kid out. Like, we think of this guy as a striker. We think of him as a knockout artist, but he's very dangerous grappling as well. His opponent is the lost Nurmagomedov brother, right? This Abubakar is kind of one notch down from the other Nurmagomedovs, in my opinion. He is coming off that win over Omar Gadzhiev. I personally bet Omar Gadzhiev that night because I fully expected that man to not be jumping guillotine the entire night. And for God knows what reason, he kept on trying to attack the front chokes on Nurmagomedov that were never even close. And then he ended up on bottom for the majority of that fight after dropping a weight class where I thought he'd be, the bigger, stronger man. Just didn't quite pan out for me that night. But Abubakar definitely has a good kicking game himself. He does dip his head to the side and swing, which sometimes I think could get him caught by a fluid kicker like Dos Santos. He uses his striking very well to disguise those level changes. He sits down on that big overhand right. You never know if he's shooting a blast double or if he's actually looking for the right hand. But at the end of the day, I'm really not that impressed with Abubakar's striking. He's there to be hit. He's extremely hittable on the feet, and he's going to rely on that grappling, but he starts striking first. He's one of these guys that doesn't really get the grappling going until he gets chinned once or twice in the fight and decides, oh, okay, I guess I better shift gears. You don't want to do that with Zaleski. Like, one or two shots might be all it takes to go ahead and end your night if you want to go that route. All three of Abubakar's losses are by finish. 2 submission, 1 KO. I'm very tempted on Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos in this spot. I know Abubakar is going to get the rub because of that name, and I tried to fade him last time, didn't pan out. I might go back to the well here in this spot, Mike, and I don't have my tinfoil hat with me because I am on vacation.
Okay.
But the Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos submission prop would definitely get my attention here because the way he flows into those dominant positions, the way he can take the back, the way he snatches the neck. Abubakar has been finished 3 times, and 2 of those have been by sub. I think there's a shot here. Obviously, just a little baby sprinkle, but I would love to see if that number was something, plus 2,000 or higher.
I wish Zaleski was a few years younger because
That too.
he has those capoeira kicks that we've seen him utilize inside the octagon. He is very unpredictable. And ask Sean Strickland about that. I mean, he was able to put him out. I believe that was at 170 pounds. And you watch Abubakar Nurmagomedov. The guy was a survivor out there last time out against Gadziev. He basically... his opponent ended up wilting, and he totally took advantage of that in the second and third rounds. In this specific matchup, I'm torn because although Abubakar may be, a shop worn or he's in his mid 30s. So you watch the PFL fights, you watch his come up, and we talked about this earlier also prior to coming on air that there are some fighters that they reach their peak early in their professional mixed martial arts careers because they've been progressing towards this, and a lot of people wait until going pro. I believe that may be the case for Abubakar. And then I look back to what's going on with Dos Santos and why he hasn't been fighting, and he had to pull out from the Munir Lazez fight after the Benoit Saint Denis fight. And by the way, oh my gosh, that was a shellacking. And you watched the referee who was there was vitriol directed at that referee for months. And look at how Benoit Saint Denis was able to turn it around and put himself in a better position these days. But in this specific spot, I have no money on the fight, but I'm leaning towards Zaleski here. I also wonder, I was at Zaleski's fight against Lyman Good, and that's a name that we haven't heard in years. Lyman Good kind of disappeared off the face of the earth after he fought Damian Maia. But in this spot, I'm leaning towards Zaleski. I'm keeping an eye on this line too. I'm not making a play on it because of the layoff. I think the layoff is a concern. We're talking about, I mean, he had a career highlight victory that he basically posterized his opponent for 15 minutes with Saint Denis. So here, Abubakar, I know he's coming off of a victory, but he's a meat and potatoes type fighter, and sometimes meat and potatoes get it done. If you have strong grappling and you duck and throw that overhand right, and he does throw it with power, but I don't think it's going to end up landing on a Zaleski Dos Santos, to be honest. I think that Dos Santos is a little bit too savvy. He's going to think about what's coming back at him, move his head off the center line, and be able to throw back, whether it be a kick or a punch. And then the cardio also. I know that he survived against his opponent last time out, Abubakar. But this time out, although Zaleski is 36 years of age, that's the reason I'm off this fight, to be honest. I wonder, the cardio. What are we talking about from a 36-year-old Zaleski? because against Liang, he was brutally knocked out, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a couple of years ago. So anybody can be put out. There are no certainties in this game. I preach that no one is invincible, but I'm leaning towards Zaleski in this specific matchup. But I understand where your head's at, and I hear where you're coming from, Clint.
All right. I'm glad I'm not just rambling at this point. I'm glad I'm still making at least a little bit of sense there. Definitely a volatile fight. These long layoffs, especially when you get to that 35, 36 year range, it's really tough to know what you're getting with these fighters. That cliff, we talked about it, Mike. That cliff comes for us all, and it could happen at any point in time. A guy who's been historically durable and tough suddenly can just be broken after 2 fights. You know what I mean? It could happen. So even though he's the guy coming off the win in this spot, I mean, technically both these guys are. I'm alluding to the Benoit Saint-Denis fight. Even though he was the victor of that fight, the fact that it took him longer to get back around to the cage, that's concerning. That, for whatever that reason was, it definitely puts question marks in your head as to whether or not you can trust him and his durability at this stage of his career. So we will see. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us here on Memorial Day. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us here. We have 130 live viewers. Please smash that like button for us. This is Mike. Give him a follow, Mike's MMA Picks. He's a great, positive type person. You guys know the kind of people I like to run with. So make sure you check him out and support him on social media as well. And then let's pay a couple bills here real quick. Of course, my main partner here, Pub Sports Radio. They host the podcast. You're on their channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to win $100, every single Saturday, we have a free Pub Sports Radio Pick'em contest. Pick your fighter, pick the round, pick the method. Winner gets $100 every single UFC fight, every single UFC card. All you got to do is beat the personalities here at Pub Sports Radio, which includes me. And I've already had, I believe, 3 victories. So bring it, baby. I'm a brown belt per our rankings here on the site. So not going to make it easy on you. Next up, Spectation Sports. If you guys want to watch regional MMA, use promo code DIEHARD. That'll give you a 20% discount off of your subscription. And hey, just last weekend when there was nothing else going on, Cage Titans 59. That card was freaking awesome. Mitch Raposo, who you guys may know and remember, made an emphatic return, got a finish, likely making it to the UFC. That was hosted right here on Spectation Sports. They've got Aries FC coming up, so some really good stuff. Make sure you sign in there, get tuned in. Last but not least, the Sharp app. They've got a Discord. I will post a link to that Discord in the description as well as on Twitter if you guys want to run with that crew over there. Sharp tools, things like the Sharp Action Report, where you can see what the Sharp bettors and the public spots are for each day, tail and fade as you wish, as well as articles, models, things of that nature. Lots of ways that they can help you be a better gambler and a winning bettor. Thank you all very much for that. One more time for hanging out with us here on Pub Sports Radio. And we have another fight to bring to you. Next up, women's MMA, baby. Karine Silva takes on Ketlen Souza in a very, very intriguing matchup, in my opinion here. Mike, I don't like Karine Silva. I really don't. I'm not sold on her even a little bit. So she's 13-3. And man, I'm sorry, her opponent is 13-3. A typo there on the name there. 15-4 is Karine Silva. And she absolutely ruined me and my Dana White's Contender Series fade angle. She went ahead and got the win over her first opponent in the UFC in Poliana Botelho. Round 1 Darce choke, never in question. But you look back at some of the stuff she did outside the UFC. She tries to play the kicking game. She has this weird, poorly timed teep that she throws out there. Very awkward. You can tell she's a primary grappler and just hasn't figured out her standing game just yet. But she knocked Poliana Botelho down with a big clubbing overhand right. She does go for that club and sub a lot. Whether she gets knocked to the ground, crashes her way into her opponent, drags them down, or knocks them down, does not matter. As long as she finds her way to the floor with her opponents, she's more than happy. And she's got a nasty submission offense. We have 8 wins so far. I'm sorry, 8 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission. She is a finisher to a T. The UFC has absolutely got to love that. But you look back at her Contender Series fight, and in my assessment, she was getting beaten pillar to post in that Contender Series fight and then jumped on a guillotine. It was a Hail Mary opportunity. She was well on her way to losing, found a way to win. And, it really just reminds me of Mackenzie Dern. Now, Dern has panned out, obviously. We saw what she was able to do in her last fight. Just shown like the brightest star the UFC's got in the main event spot. But early on in her career, women just kept flinging themselves into her guard. Like she was this close to losing like 3 different UFC fights, and then her opponents would just jump into her guard and give her her best opportunity. And that's kind of the vibes I'm getting from Karine Silva, that if she doesn't hit that home run, like somebody's just going to be better than her. Ketlen Souza is coming to us from the Invicta FC, 13-3. She is a vicious little powerhouse. She reminds me kind of like a miniature version of Jessica Andrade. She really is explosive, fires hard knees and elbows from the clinch. She bites down on big power hooks. She's pretty solid defensively too. She kind of stays out of the way if she's not where she can hit you. And then if she gets you down to the ground, she is nasty in top position, Mike. I don't know if you saw the rib roasters that she fires when she gets on top of people. She will destroy your body, open up your head, and then pound you through the canvas if she gets on top of you. 8 wins by knockout on Ketlen Souza. This is another spot where I think violence makes a ton of sense, because you've got one girl who can knock anybody out at this weight class. You've got the other girl who obviously can submit anybody at this weight class, still relatively low level, both of them prone to making poor choices, bad decisions. I think we could very easily see a finish here in this spot. I am never putting this kind of price tag on Silva personally, because of the limitations that I mentioned before, because the fact that she is so dependent, in my opinion, on that finish. I think Ketlen Souza can win minutes in this spot. If it somehow manages to go 15, I think her style is maybe more attractive to the judges. She won't be accepting bottom position. She'll be wrestling. She'll be the one coming forward. She'll be the one landing probably the harder, more impactful shots, as long as she's not getting hit with, the previously mentioned club and sub. I don't like Karine Silva plus or minus 215. I would be more on the dog side, plus 185. Ketlen Souza, lean to violence, dog or pass for me. What do you think, Mike?
Okay. I agree with you that there are better ways to approach this fight or target this fight than the money line. And did you see the look? Did you see the size of Karine Silva's bicep in her Tapology page? She looks the part. She has a ton of submissions on her resume, and then you look at Souza, and you don't typically see this many TKO and KO victories on a resume. So she comes out looking to finish fights. Both of these ladies do, and I echo your sentiment here. I do believe that we are in for a potential finish. I would advise others to keep an eye out for fight doesn't go the distance lines that may be potentially opening at a number of books in the near future. I may be playing that myself. We'll see how things go, but I do lean the way of Karine Silva. I think that she can fight safe, which could potentially help her here. And gosh darn it, the Priscilla Cachoeira fight, for Cachoeira to miss weight here, I was planning on making a play on Karine Silva inside the distance, which is a very rare play for me to make on a women's mixed martial arts event or bout. But she was going to be the play, and Cachoeira didn't make weight. So that must be mentioned also, that Karine Silva looks like she carries some muscle on her, and she may potentially have to or had to have made a cut here recently, about a month or so ago, a month and a half. So in this fight, in this specific spot, I did see the footage on Souza. I think that she is potentially a live underdog, but then I go back and I watched the Karine Silva fight. I know you mentioned that it was like a Hail Mary submission, the Kihui Yan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Fight that name right, but that fighter was. Her physique was unlike any other women's mixed martial arts fighter I've seen in the history of mixed martial arts. I'm talking Jessica Andrade, etc., but she was built like a tank, and
little powerhouse.
She brought her A game, and Karine Silva was tested, and she came out on top. So you talk about overcoming adversity, and I believe you look at that record too. I believe her opponent was 22-3. I know, granted, that may have been padded due to the Chinese regional scene, but in this specific spot, I think that Karine Silva is the goods here, but I'm not going to play that money line. I've made a pact with myself to avoid these type of plays. And like you, Clint, I'm going to be targeting a fight doesn't go the distance or under 2.5 round prop. That for me is going to be a play. Possible. Okay. I got to see the number though.
Of course, number matters, and I agree. As long as we get an okay number on it, I definitely think that's probably the path. And I agree with you on the Priscilla Cachoeira spot. She's one of my underrated underdogs that I've gone to many a time. Priscilla Cachoeira, and that was the biggest setup spot I think I've ever seen, where you see that she's not developed her grappling whatsoever, and they go, oh, we've got this stud young finisher who's a primary grappler coming off the Contender Series. Let's give her to Priscilla. That was a beautiful spot for violence, because more often than not, I think Priscilla gets tapped out there if she doesn't land a bomb. So that would have been a beautiful under that was taken from us. Hopefully this one also gets there regardless. Next up, the talk of the town, Tim Elliott taking on Victor Altamirano. And there's been a lot to be made about poor Tim Elliott. The whole falling out of the Glory MMA thing, apparently Gina Mazzani cheating on him with his best friend and training partner, just brutal situations going on here with poor Tim Elliott. And I'll be honest with you, Mike. So I'm a gambler first. You know what I mean? Like I love, okay, I'm going to take that back. I'm a human first. I definitely want these people to be taken care of. I care about fighter safety. I'm an advocate for fighter pay, all those types of things. So first and foremost, I feel for Tim Elliott, but then my brain immediately flips to gambling, where I go, okay, now we got to do a show. We got to talk bets. How do we make money on this fight? And frankly, I think a lot of people are sympathetically overvaluing Tim Elliott. And I think it might have something to do with what he's going through, because he's a very sympathetic figure right now. Everyone's rooting for the guy. He's always been a fan favorite. He's always been a fun fighter. But I don't understand why everybody's lining up to lay minus 175 on Tim Elliott in this spot. He's got great cardio. He pushes a solid pace. He's a pretty good wrestler. But he's always been kind of mid-tier at best. Like, yes, he fought his way to a title shot, but that was when he won the Ultimate Fighter and there was nobody in the world to face Demetrius Johnson. He's been fighting kind of the scourge of the division until very recently. Guys like Ryan Benoit, Jordan Espinoza, those are the types of fights that they're putting him in there with after falling out of that contenders circle. And of course, he's going to handle those types of guys. He steps up against Matthias Nicolou. He loses that fight. Now, he did win the Tagir Ulanbekov spot handily. I bet him that night. People called me crazy. I loved that spot, but that's because I think Tabir is a bit of a fraud. You've got to be able to handle the pace and the grappling pressure that Tim Elliott puts on people. Victor Altamirano may be one of the few people in this weight class that can match the cardio and pace of a Tim Elliott, in my opinion. The guy is 12-2, absolute insanity for his cardio. He's a death by 1,000 cuts type of fighter. 74% takedown defense so far in his UFC tenure. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. Great head movement, light on his feet. Seems like he sees well. He sees what his opponents are throwing at him very well. And with the awkward striking of a Tim Elliott, I think that's going to be very, very important. But at the end of the day, Tim Elliott throws a lot of stuff out there that misses just for the sake of that volume, for the sake of the confusion, for causing the chaos that he thrives in. That's what he does. I think Victor is the much cleaner striker. I think he's going to be the one landing more often. And even though Tim does span those takedowns, 3.73 takedowns per 15 minutes, landing at a 44% accuracy, you've got 74% takedown defense from Victor. He will be able to stuff some of those takedowns. He'll be able to get up. And in a weight class where the youth and the speed is extremely important, I think Victor's going to have those advantages here in this spot. I think this line is a little bit too wide. I'm waiting to see what happens, because with everybody and their mother piling in on Tim Elliott, I kind of think this line might move that direction. I have not bet it yet. This fight may be a very closely contested one, maybe even a split decision, that kind of a situation. So I'm not convinced yet that I want to get in on Victor. But if you're predicting a fight going to split, if you think it's going to be that close, a plus 155 dog is probably the side that you should be on. That's the side that I lean to. I'm not sure how I'm approaching it just yet, but for me, betting wise, this is dog or pass.
Fascinating matchup. And you have a 36-year-old Tim Elliott who he's admitted this, that he has a lot of miles on him and that he's coming off of a knee injury where we got stem cell replacement. And I know there was an interview recently by John Coe that was posted, but he also changed camps. You know, he left Glory, and the guy looks in the best shape of his career. I am concerned a little bit about him making weight at 36 years of age. He's carrying a lot of muscle, at least it looks that way. I believe the interview was conducted in a hot tub at one point. But in this specific spot, you know, you got an Altamirano, who's coming off of a victory over Vinicius Salvador, right? So that was a sloppy flyweight matchup. And one thing I can bank on is Tim Elliott coming out here like hell on wheels. He's going to try to put Altamirano on his back, and can he hold him there? Because Tim Elliott, he can be a bit of a spaz at times. He's in perpetual motion. We'll say that. He's incredibly gifted from an athletic standpoint, and at 125 pounds has solid cardio. Last time I saw him really burn himself out against Brandon Royval. And I see the comment up here that Altamirano rolls, but the challenge, the thing that I'm concerned about, somebody who has an 83% hit rate on this specific weight class is Tim Elliott going to come out too hot and burn himself out? That is a concern of mine. I got to be honest. I've watched the tape for this bout, and Altamirano, the LFA footage, I like the long strikes. I like that against Lacerda. By the way, Daniel Lacerda deserves another fight inside the UFC's octagon. Under the right tutelage, in the right atmosphere, camp, etc., he should be fighting. And he has a bright future, even though the record doesn't show it. But here, Altamirano, he could potentially become live, and I think it could be Tim Elliott's over aggressiveness that ends up biting him here. But I will say that you watch the Tim Elliott interview, and he says that he's a soldier, not a general, and that he listens to what his coaches tell him to do. And he did that with Kraus. And I think that he's going to do that in this spot here. And it's just a matter of, can he cross that finish line, Clint? Can he get across that finish line? That 15-minute mark, there's a lot of actions going to take place during those 3 rounds. It's not like it's a cakewalk here. And Altamirano will go for it. And he has fight-ending power, both on his feet, and he throws some kicks too. So, man, I'm not touching this fight from a money line standpoint, especially at -175, -160, etc. for Tim Elliott. As a 36-year-old who's lost 12 fights, I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves here. And we'll talk about Kai Kara France also, who has 10 professional losses on his career later on. But here, man, I think that this fight doesn't see the scorecards. I think that someone's going to get finished. I think that all that pent-up aggression, I think that's going to come out inside the octagon here. And I also believe that you listen to Tim Elliott in his interview, and he says that, you know, he's going to try some new maneuvers here. What else can he try? He's tried everything. He's hell on wheels, and he's very unorthodox. And in this specific matchup, I think that I do lean Elliott. I will say that. I lean Elliott. I think that he will most likely walk away with a victory in this spot. But I also think that the likelihood of this fight hitting the scorecards is less than 50%. That's what I see. And you look at, I think we're getting a plus number on Fight Doesn't Go the Distance. Granted, this is 125-pound fighters, so, you know, the lightest weight class, but also
not one of the finishing weight classes, you know, presumably most of the time.
Yeah, and these guys are going to be going for it. There's no doubt in my mind. You look at Altamirano, the way he finished Lacerda, I mean, he smelled blood in the water. And you want to back fighters who have that killer instinct. And he does. And both of these fighters do. But the challenge for me, Royval and others, and you watch the Askarov fight. Here's another thing. We talked about Altamirano's power. And I go back and Elliott's right in his interview that he hasn't been really brutally hurt on the feet. The Askarov bout was kind of the closest I've seen to him being really brutally finished via strikes. So he hasn't taken much damage up top. Granted, his knee may be an issue, but I'll be picking Elliott to win, and I'll likely be targeting a fight doesn't go the distance prop.
Okay, interesting. So we're slightly on opposite sides here in this one, and that is very concerning. So those of you who may not be familiar with my guy's work, our guest today is the unequivocal king of the men's flyweight division. Like, can you just spout your percentage one more time for us, Mike? Let the people know.
83% hit rate for, I believe, over 38 units, which is almost 38 or so percent ROI. But this is dating back to 2017. You know what? It's Clint. I got to be honest with you. We talk about picking our spots, and this is just a spot that I've been extremely disciplined for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe I'll be honest. I started noticing the stat. Once it was about 78 or 80%, I was like, you know what? I got to keep this where it's at or raise it up. So I'm not going to take big chances. And I realized that percentage of spots where you win is not the end all be all. You want to end up in the profit, right? You want to take home the bag and be a profitable handicapper. But I have been profitable at this weight class, and I thought potentially that it was a fluke at one point. I'll be honest. I remember Lucrative MMA. James asked me, like, how is this happening? And I thought about it, and I realized that there are a lot of things in play here. You got the cardio, you got the fluidity, you've got the gas tanks, you got the vulnerability to be submitted, and also the amount of submissions that get attempted in a 15-minute fight. You look at Pantoja, you look at Royval, you look at Kai Kara France, how many times he's fended off submissions. You look at Amir Albazi. You look up and down this Brandon Moreno, Figueiredo, Henry Cejudo. You look all up and down this weight class, and there's a lot of action in that cage in 25 minutes. And for whatever reason, I've just been able to break things down. I'm humble, I'm grateful, and I just try to stay within my wheelhouse. And I don't have any place on this specific card yet, but I'm hoping to do so, and I'm watching the numbers. I'll say that. But it is what it is, Clint.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. And man, that kind of a hit rate is phenomenal. So even, limiting your action potentially, or like you mentioned, picking your spots, none of that matters. An 80+% hit rate on a single group of bets, absolute insanity. So people, when we were setting up this schedule, when we were looking at opportunities for Mike to come on the podcast, he specifically said, Clint, I need flyweights. And I went, all right, we're going to get you on a flyweight card. That just makes too much sense. So I don't like being, even if it's just a lean, I don't like being on the other side of your lean here in this spot. But for the sake of the pick, we'll go head to head here in this spot. I don't have a bet. I don't have a bet on this one yet. I definitely want to watch this fight. We'll see how this goes. It's going to be just a tornado of knees and elbows. Like, I can't tell you how this fight's going to play out. Like in any Tim Elliott fight, it's going to be chaos. But then you add a guy like Victor in there who's got just as much pace and cardio as Tim does. It's going to be insanity. I can't wait for this one. This should be very, very fun. Shout out my guy, VB, in the chat. What is up, man? Thank you for gracing us with your presence. I understand looking at the stats, but Tim also fought people like DJ twice, the better fighters, Royval, Tagir, then Altamirano fought basically all jobbers and former UFC fighters. And I couldn't agree more with that. VB, I totally understand that angle. This is another one of those fighters that falls into, I don't want to say a step down, because obviously Tim's last opponent was Tagir, but it's in that lower bucket caliber of fighter. It's a crossroads fight for me. We've seen an ushering of a lot of these fighters that are getting older out. That skill set doesn't stay primed forever. And it could be a spot where we see another changing of the guard, where Victor is the younger fighter who has the same tools that Tim has physically and can use those gifts to get on by him We'll see. I don't feel strongly about this VB, and I have not had an opportunity to check out your work yet this week. So I'm not sure. I would assume, based on your comment, that Elliott is probably the side that you're leaning to, but I'm sure you and I will converse a little bit later in the week, and I'll find out here. All right, everybody, let's get to these last couple of fights. Very exciting times here. We've got Jim Miller welcoming back Jared Gordon. Huge talking point. The biggest thing that I can think of for this fight, Mike, is Jared Gordon just came off of a knockout. And not just any knockout, a bad knockout. Now, you can say whatever you want about the clash of the heads that led towards the end of that moment there. The clash of the heads stunned him, rocked him, knocked him back a little bit. Mike, it was the follow-up shot. It was the one where Bobby Green put this man on ice when he was on his back that has me extremely concerned. I've talked on this podcast time and time again about Jared Gordon's durability in his chin. I felt like it's a problem for him. It always has been. And then he gets flatlined by Bobby Green in a very unexpected way. I think this is too soon. I think this is way too soon for Jared Gordon to be coming back. The problem is, if you take that one little piece of the puzzle out of this for me, Jared Gordon should dog walk this version of Jim Miller. Now, prime Jim Miller, I absolutely bet against Jared Gordon any day. But this isn't prime Jim Miller. This is Jim Miller who's trying to limp his way to UFC 300. The man is 39 years old. He's coming off of a loss. And he is falling apart rapidly. He did get the win over Alexander Hernandez. He proved that he's still, he took the L over Alexander Hernandez. He hung in that fight. He showed toughness. He showed his willingness to not quit. And Jared Gordon has nowhere near that caliber of offense. So I do not see Jared Gordon coming out here and finishing someone like Jim Miller. He's a grinder. That's what the guy does. Jim Miller always has that patented guillotine. He will jump for that thing. He's got a super tight squeeze on him, and he does have big power in his hands. Jim Miller can let it fly and slug it out with his opponents when he wants to. We've seen a couple, when he had that little resurgence not too long ago before he beat Donald Cerrone, the Nicholas Mota fight where he knocked him out in the second round, the Ghost Pepper where he hit him with that overhand left in the second round. Jim still got his power. It's there. But I think Jared Gordon is more processed. I think he's going to do what he does. He will stay safe in boxing range. He will mitigate any type of damage, and then he'll get in on a level change, and Jim Miller will go for that guillotine. Jim Miller will go for the arm bars off his back. He will play jiu-jitsu in this spot. And because of that, I think Jared Gordon still is just going to grind out a decision win over Jim Miller. So it makes me sick to my stomach because one of my favorite fades on the planet is Jared Gordon. And I have been very unsuccessful in doing so, recently. He's done a whole lot better than I expected him to. The split decision over Joe Zaleski still makes me, taste my own vomit just a little bit. But I'm going to pick Jared Gordon to get the win over Jim Miller here on Saturday, probably by decision.
This is another interesting matchup where you have to wonder from a medical perspective, how was Jared Gordon cleared and offered this fight so quickly after his head was against the canvas while Bobby Green was throwing punches down at it and landing. And it seemed like, from my perspective, that Gordon's head, his eyes rolled back. It looked like he was out from the vantage point of the television viewer. Granted, I wasn't cage side, so but I will say that you wonder now. I look at Jim Miller's record, 35-17 at 39 years of age. How many times has he experienced that in the training room that we're completely unaware of? So you watch Jim Miller, and I was against Alexander Hernandez. I thought that he had a legitimate shot there, and we saw he did. He locked up the body triangle, was able to almost lock up a submission at the end of that fight. But realize this, that Jared Gordon is a solid grappler in his own right and also has a serious gas tank here. And that those first few minutes of the Bobby Green fight, he looked great. He looked like he was exchanging in the pocket, not getting caught by Bobby Green. I'll be honest, I don't know how he pulled that off because I was on, I believe, Fight Doesn't Go the Distance in that specific matchup. But in this spot, although I do have concerns about Gordon taking this fight too soon, he seemed like he was ready to go, man. prior to getting knocked out, he was looking the part, and also he's 5 years the younger here, and I'm going to be picking Gordon also, but again, you have to tread with caution. Does this happen via decision? Do the wheels fall off? When was the last time we've seen a fighter sustain an in-fight injury? Because that is a real possibility here for Jim
Please,
Miller.
let's not start those again. That was a brutal run. What,
Aspinall?
3 main events in a row?
Yeah, Aspinall maybe. Yeah. So, man, I could see something like that happening. And you bring up the Zaleski fight. It's funny. I had that in my notes also, that I could see it playing out in a very similar fashion to that. Now, once Jared Gordon is able to find himself on top, I expect will burn time here, but it's going to be dangerous for him to close distance and do so early against the Ghost Pepper we saw and others. Mauda, he's live. He's live when it's on the feet, and also he's live on the mat. We've seen against other opponents, Oliveira and others, he's fought pretty darn hard, and both of these fighters have common opponents in Charles Oliveira. But by the way, I got to mention this too. Props to Jared Gordon for taking that fight against Charles Oliveira in Brazil, a fight that it's been shown that Justin Gaethje turned down. So Jared Gordon stepped up and took that fight. And granted, he did get knocked out in that fight, but props to him. So I'll be picking Jared Gordon here, and it's just a matter of, does he get it done via decision? Because we know that Jim Miller is tough as nails.
Absolutely. The man will fight for your money. You talked about that earlier, and the term I like to use for those kinds of guys is a good soldier, Mike. Someone that'll come out and work for you and never quit on you. Those are the people we want when we place a bet. So Jim Miller has proven time and time again that he absolutely will fight for your money. So if you want to take that shot, I can't ever really talk you off that kind of a spot. Personally, I lean with the favorite here, but we'll see what happens on Saturday. All right, everybody, we are winding down. One more time, do me a favor, hit the like button if you haven't already. It goes a long way to supporting us here on the show and the algorithm, and give Mike a follow. If you're not following this man and his work, he's very good at what he does. Someone whose opinion you definitely can listen to get some information and hopefully improve your flyweight betting record. Absolutely. Next up, we've got Bruce Leroy Caceres taking on Daniel Pineda in one of the more intriguing matchups, I think, here on the card this week. Mike, I'm very, very ready to go for this fight because Alex Caceres, you've got to give this man his props. Like, I was ready to write Alex Caceres off for dead years ago. He was an absolute flop coming off the Ultimate Fighter. Looked like he couldn't keep up, fell apart. They threw him to Kron Gracie. And then he went on this legendary run. I mean, Ocho Peterson, Chase Hooper, Austin Springer, Kevin Kroom, Sung Woo Choi finishes rear naked choke over Austin Springer, rear naked choke over Sung Woo Choi. And then he gets Sadiq Youssef, a man who I counted him out against very, very much so. He did lose that night, but he was very impressive in that fight. And then he knocked out Julian Erosa in the first round in his rebound fight. This man is absolutely making a case for the fact that not only does he belong here, but he's actually improving somehow at 34 years of age. Like, he is getting better. He's belonging in a higher class of fighter here in the UFC. I thought he was surviving against bottom feeders, and I bet a couple of those bottom feeders against him during that win streak that he was on. I've got to take a little bit of that back. I've got to give nothing but props to Bruce Leroy Caceres. He's obviously worked on his grappling. His jiu-jitsu has gotten a whole lot slicker. He uses his reins exceedingly well. He's a very flowy striker from the outside. Good footwork, good movement. He's hard to pin down and catch. His opponent, on the other hand, Daniel Pineda, the Pit himself, 28-14. Until very recently, the only man ever caught by the PFL for performance-enhancing drugs. He's an absolute steamroller of a human being. The opposite of flowy, strikey, decision 80 Alex Caceres. This man is a finisher. 19 wins by submission, 9 wins by KO. Not a single win over that entire illustrious career by decision. He's lost 5 of them, so he has been to decision. He just never wins decisions. So he's been finished by knockout 3 times, by sub 6 times, tends to be a forced kill or be killed type of fighter. Had a couple of his nasty round one wins overturned to no contests, but don't let that bother you coming into this one. Cub Swanson, it comes to mind when you think about the way he fights. Couldn't quite get the finish, gets murdered in round two. That's kind of the way it goes. But he absolutely killed Herbert Burns via crucifix in the second round. And then the horrific eye poke situation with Andrei Philipe, which to this day, I still absolutely feel for him about. I was not sold on him coming back against Tucker Lutz. I think he's limited. I think he's old. He's very PED dependent. I have no problem saying that on film. He's 37 years old. And I thought coming back after that long layoff that he had, multiple canceled bouts, this guy is not going to have it anymore. He looked incredible against Tucker Lutz. Maybe all-time best performance. Not only was he not round one or bust in that fight, he kind of methodically destroyed Tucker Lutz over the course of the first round and then finished him in the second when Tucker couldn't keep up with him. Like, if Tucker could have taken the beating, this man would have won his first ever career decision. He looks somehow improved at 37 years of age. And now he's a lifelong PED popper. So I have zero issues saying that I think this man has figured out his cycle. And now that he has found the fountain of youth again and has drugs that are not yet on the banned list, I think he's a force. I'll be honest with you, Mike. I definitely think this is a spot where it's dog or pass. I like Daniel Pineda, plus 150, the underdog. Probably going to be my first bet on this card. Alex Caceres is minus 170. I see a lot of people laying the wood. I see a lot of people parlaying Alex Caceres. I like the dog here. I do think that Alex Caceres still has a bit of an issue grappling against higher level opponents. This is a higher level opponent. This is the type of man who will sell out and physically just be able to overpower Bruce Leroy. And once this fight is on the ground, the little improvements Caceres has made that can help him against somebody like Sungwoo Choi or Kevin Kroom, that's not going to be enough against Daniel Pineda. I like Daniel Pineda in this spot. I think at worst, this should be kind of a pick 'em price tag. And I think too much is being made of the knockout over Julian Erosa. I talked about that going into that fight. Juicy J's chin. He's got one of the worst chins in the UFC. Like, he's a great hammer, but a bad nail. And Alex found the button on him with a gorgeous head kick. I think he just found the button on a guy who's extremely chinny. You know, you go back before that, the last guy that he finished, not by submission, but by knockout, before that is, I'm still scrolling. Rear naked. You know what? You go back through his run and he's only got 4 KO wins. And it's got to be one of these ones where they don't even record the method so far back, because I'm just seeing a lot of rear naked chokes and then a couple of wins on the Florida regional scene. He's not a power puncher. And unless Daniel Pineda is completely exhausted, I don't think Bruce Leroy is knocking this man out. So I'm going to go with the dog here in this spot, Mike. I'm definitely very curious to hear your thoughts on this one, because I do feel like I'm on a bit of an island for this one.
You did a great job laying that out, Clint. And I agree with you to a certain extent. The Alex Caceres career is a great case study. You know, I remember, I believe he fought Uriah Faber way, way back in the day. And you look at how he has survived and persevered and redefined himself and not been a... he hasn't been stuck to the game here. He's kind of done his own thing out on the outskirts of the UFC and has, with a noodly frame and not devastating striking, been able to not only not been finished that often, he has been able to squeak out decisions, been able to land that was a funky, the way he dragged his foot after throwing the punch and landed that kill shot on Juicy J. And I was on Juicy J there. I thought that was a great spot. So that one hurt. But in this specific instance, I see Pineda. Yeah, it's hard for me not to get away from the way he goes balls to the wall in the first round, especially inside of the smaller octagon. I think that may be an issue here. I see some recency bias with the Tucker Lutz situation, but you're right. He may have found the fountain of youth once again under USADA, trying to kind of skirt around it. He is talented. Pineda, no doubt about it. He has killer instinct. He has finishing ability. And you brought up a point that I had written down also, that the lack of wins via decision, that just speaks to who he is. He will go for it. And the Herbert Burns issue, there have been others. I personally think that Alex Caceres is going to survive this and turn a tide late. And granted, here's how I see this fight playing out. I see Pineda gassing himself out in the second round, and I see Caceres locking up a third round submission. I would just keep an eye out for that prop. I don't advise folks going out and just laying the straight money line. I think there's like minus 170 or so. I think there's better ways of approaching this if you're planning on banking on the Caceres. But I hear what you're saying. I think that Pineda is a live dog. That man, Andrei Philipe, that was something. I had Philipe, I believe, inside the distance. That one hurt like hell because I was watching him get shellacked. I think I've used that word twice. This
good word though. It's a good one.
But yeah, so that was another one. I also sandblasted. He was getting sandblasted too. So
there you go.
Oh man. So I'm going to be picking Bruce Leroy here, and I think that he is going to do enough to turn the tide late. But yes, he should meet some serious adversity en route. And by the way, props to the UFC for giving Bruce Leroy a co-main event slot here. I think that is a little. He deserves some of the rub. The guy's put in so much time, and I think this is his 27th UFC fight, if I'm not mistaken. So he's put in the time, and he's still here, and he hasn't taken brutal beatings. So he's a tough kid and young man. So I'll be picking Bruce Leroy.
He's absolutely a vet, definitely a company man. I agree. He deserves that rub. He deserves that co-main event slot. Happy to see him get that. And this is a spot where, Mike, I completely understand what you're saying. It's Pineda early and Caceres late, right? Like, it's pretty binary. I think Pineda is going to get it done early. I'm going to be looking for very specifically the submission prop, because I think that's the way he does it. Is he probably just mauls his way in the small cage, pins Caceres up against the fence, drags him to the mat, and finds that tap very, very early. I'm hoping I get a nice sexy number on that sub prop. Inside the distance, I think, is fine because he could always ground and pound. But the one thing, Caceres is incredibly difficult to knock out. That guy's got a chin on him. He's got an absolute. Now I know he's got like the fro, but they say he's got a beard on him when he's got a chin, right? Like it's incredibly difficult to actually knock that man out. So I think you're probably pretty safe going sub rather than inside the distance, unless that number is no different. If it's like, plus 150 inside the distance, plus 140 sub. Take inside the, or I'm sorry, I got those reversed, but you get the point. Take the inside the distance and protect yourself if the number is not very different. But I'm hoping we get a sexy submission number, and I'll definitely be looking to play that. Maybe the round one sub prop as well, and definitely live bet. I saw a lot of people in the chat. Y'all are smart. You in the chat, you guys are on top of it. Very good live betting opportunity. If Pineda blows his wad early in this fight, expect Caceres to start to take over, because he is the slicker, cleaner striker. Over the course of this fight, down the stretch, he will probably take the fight back and potentially even finish. So yeah, plus money, even money, anything like that on Caceres after the first round is probably a good way to approach it as well. And with that, folks, we will steer straight on into your main event here of the evening. We have got a massive flyweight fight. Kaikara France taking on Amir Albazi. I am so excited to talk through this one with you here, Mike, because obviously you are the flyweight king, but this is such a fun matchup. You've got Kaikara France, a guy who I maybe unfairly, well, not maybe, I definitely unfairly shortchanged and rode off a little bit too early. I kind of thought he was the third wheel with these guys that are, coming out of the same gym as Israel Adesanya, Volkanovski. Like, I felt like he was the weaker of those options, and he's turned out to be just absolutely phenomenal. He's made improvements. He's gotten better. When he was struggling with the older version of my guy, Brandon Moreno, and then getting finished by Brandon Royval, like, I thought he was going to be kind of a gatekeeper and settle into that middle of the road type of range. And then he starches Rogerio Bontorin after showing off spectacular submission defense. I thought Bontorin had him multiple times in that fight, and then he showed off his unreal power for this weight class. Absolutely destroys the guy. Cody Garbrandt, that chin is gone. That was a glorious night betting Kaikara France against Cody Garbrandt. The one that really got me, though, Mike, was the Askar Askarov fight. I'll be honest with you. Askar was my next champion. Askar was my guy that I said, this is the prospect. This is the next champion. I felt like he had everything he needed to take over and run this weight class for a while. Now, I do want to kind of pull back and say that Askar put out some kind of a post, something to the effect of needing to overcome. He's got some kind of illness or something that's ailing him. He stepped away from the sport, I believe, for some time. So I have to wonder, what percent of Askar Askarov did we get the night that he fought Kai Kara-France? I do not want to take anything away from Kai Kara-France and his beautiful performance that night, but I am very, very much wondering if Askar wasn't already maybe perhaps feeling the effects of whatever he's going through that evening. The Brandon Moreno fight, frankly, I thought he was winning. Brandon Moreno is my guy. I love Brandon Moreno, and I've made so much money going to the bank with Brandon Moreno. But before that liver kick, Kai Kara-France was without a doubt in that fight. Now, regardless of whether or not he was ahead on the scorecards, I thought he may have been. Kai Kara-France proved that he's fighting at the absolute pinnacle of this weight class. That's the current seated champion. And it took a liver kick, which, if those of you who have not done any training, when you take a liver shot, there's no options. Your body shuts down. You fall over, you're done. Like there is nothing going on until your body resets when you get hit by a liver shot like that. So it's no shortcoming of Kai Kara-France that he got put down by that body shot from the best fighter in this weight class. Amir Albazi is, in my opinion, the next wave. 16-1. They call this man the Prince. He's fighting out of Extreme Couture. That gym is doing big things right now. I love that gym. I love the stable of fighters that they have. I love the coaching staff. But this is a massive step up in competition. Now, he was supposed to fight guys like Alex Perez, Brandon Royval. Those fights got pulled. They got canceled. He was supposed to fight Tim Elliott once upon a time as well. So it shows you the UFC knows this guy belongs in the contender circle. They're trying to push him. They're trying to get him up there. Just can't seem to get him a fight against these types of fighters, unfortunately. I mean, Perez, the usual pull-out situation, obviously. And then I guess Brandon Royval had an injury as well that caused him to pull that fight. So he gets Alexandre Costa. That was a clinic. And now Alexandre Costa is also not, a top 5 UFC guy or anything like that. In fact, he's a Contender Series kid, but he has a very, very clean, shiny record. It was 12-2 at the time. And Albazi put a pace on him. He ripped the body on the feet. He hurt the guy several times. He was patient. He mixed in his wrestling and then ended up finishing him with a gorgeous uppercut in round 3. Just, you could not ask for a better performance from Albazi. Going from that guy to Kai Kara-France, though, it cannot be misspoken just how big of a jump in competition that is. And before that, we've only got Francisco Figueiredo and Zhalgas Zhumagulov to kind of rate the fighter that we're talking about here. I want to pick Amir Albazi. I do think this is another changing of the guard situation. I do think this is a spot where the grappling that he shows mixed in with the very natural athleticism, speed, and power on the feet, kind of what I thought that my guy Askarov would be able to do, which is flow between the striking and the grappling enough to actually cause Kai Kara-France some problems. I think Amir Albazi has that same attribute, and I think he can pull that off. But frankly, he's got to fight a perfect game plan. I've seen him get countered with shots. And if you let Kai Kara-France land some of those big open opportunities on you, it's not going to end well for you. So I am very, very close. Like, I kind of want to pick Amir Albazi, but I have zero confidence in that pick whatsoever. And this is a pick'em price tag in a spot where all I can say is this guy is fighting the best fighter he's ever fought by a mile. Giant step up. I prefer fading fighters in that position, but for some reason I'm attracted to Mr. Albazi and think he might be the goods and might actually be able to pull this off. Mike, you are the expert. Please talk to me. Tell me how wrong I am and why I should be betting Kai Kara-France.
You're making a great case for Albazi, and you're being, that's an honest assessment for Kai Kara-France. He's a fighter who I believe has he's 24-10, if I'm not mistaken. He's a fighter who's learned from his mistakes, and oftentimes he's learned those mistakes on the highest stages under the bright lights inside the octagon here. And you have to be honest with yourself here when you say the level of competition for when you compare Albazi to Kai Kara-France, there's a stark contrast here. Kai Kara-France has been in there with Pantoja. He's been in there with Moreno. He's been in there with a lot of high-profile heavy hitters, submission experts, etc. But then on the flip side of things, you look at Albazi, and he has done what he's had to do in order to get where he is today. And he does have a threat here, which is Kai Kara-France's kryptonite in regards to the grappling and the submissions. One thing I can't, once I watched the Jose Shorty Torres fight against Albazi. I recommend folks go back and watch that. That took place in 2019. I believe I saw it on YouTube. Albazi's striking defense back then in 2019 left a lot to be desired. He was dropped by Torres multiple times, did not look great on the feet, eating punches. And this is a Shorty Torres who was coming off of getting obliterated by Alex Perez on the feet. So that was his first fight back after that bout. Now, I watched tape on many fights headed up into this specific matchup, and this is a winnable fight for both fighters. I'm going to say that straight out, and I understand why the line is what it is. At one point, I believe Kai Kara-France was in the plus 150s, plus 160s, etc. And then he went down to the plus 130s. And now it's a pick 'em, basically. So I understand the smaller octagon is, we have to think of twofold here, Clint. Number one, it's going to force action, that the grappling will be paramount. Closing the distance, navigating that terrain from one fighter to the other is going to be huge. How is Albazi going to do that without getting caught? Because I will say, Kai Kara-France, when I watch him fight, his greatest attribute is his fluidity. And he's only about 5'4", 5'3" or so. I give him that. And he's able to get back up to his feet in an instant, oftentimes. But you're talking about a serious back taker here, someone who in Albazi looks like he's been training for multiple weeks here in preparation for this. But I still, to be honest, I can't get away from the Jose Torres bouts and how his chin, he was dropped multiple times in that fight. And you bring up a great point with Askarov. I've seen it many times before. I believe I was on Bontarin against Kai Kara-France. So that was a loss for me at this weight class that I've, 83 or so percent hitting. So, and you look, I posted a picture a few days ago of how close Bontarin came to submitting Kai Kara-France. That, to fight off that choke, the rear naked choke, he had to use all of his wits and maintain his consciousness to survive the toughest of times. And he was able to do so. And then I believe Bontarin has struggled with the scales. He's a fighter who has also been knocked out in Ryzen since leaving the UFC. So I have my questions there. But if somebody like
he kind of fell apart after that. Looked like he death gassed after that.
Yeah, he death gassed. And then he had Kai Kara-France celebrating over him a few seconds later. So I believe Herb Dean was involved in that situation. But in this specific spot, I'm leaning towards Kai Kara-France being able to land the kill shot here. I think a safer play at this stage in the game, you look at the fight doesn't go the distance line for flyweights, and in this specific fight, I think the line set at 3.5 rounds, the over-under. I'm leaning towards an under in that spot. If you get a decent number on fight doesn't go the distance, I think the under is the fight doesn't go the distance prop is a solid number there. But I'll be honest, Clint, I got to be honest with you. As we well know, there are no certainties in this game. And here in this specific spot, Kai Kara-France's kryptonite is his grappling, and he can be controlled on the mat. That is a reality here. So I'm not going to dismiss that, but I will say that the striking defense, and I've seen it improve. I noticed that Albazi's got a jab and he's got that uppercut that he was able to devastate his last opponent, Costa, with, right? That was something that was part of the fight ending sequence there. So this specific fight, I'm leaning towards Kai Kara-France and I don't have a play on it. I'm watching the line move around. I think that fight doesn't go the distance is a better option at this stage in the game. And if Albazi is able to close the distance and is able to lock in a body triangle, if he's able to control Kai Kara-France on the mat, that's a real threat. But I'm also seeing in the comments by TNT Kai by KO. I think that also, if you're one of the fighters, if you're one of the handicappers, if you want to play both sides of a fight, then try Kai by knockout and Albazi by submission. I think those are the two. If you want to arb, we call that arbing in the handicapping world. That's one option that you could look at. I don't think this fight goes the distance, and if it does, I could see Kai Kara-France winning. But it should be a hell of a fight. And I'm honestly, this is my favorite weight class. I wish I had like a hot take for you, Clint. But to be honest here, I do think that there are some landmines here for Kai Kara-France. I would not be going out and laying 3, 4, 5 units on any side of this specific fight. Mm-hmm. I think that, and remember, a unit is 1% of your entire bankroll. So I'm going to be leaning and picking Kai Kara-France here. And I also want to pay attention to weigh-ins too, because Kai Kara-France, he has no problem making this weight. We've seen him make championship weight against Moreno. But I want to see Albazi too. I think that he is putting in the work. I know he's putting in the work in Vegas, and it should be a solid fight. The footwork goes to, and by the way, one thing I got to mention, I look at keys to victory and keys to defeat. There are two sides to every fight, and you really need to honestly assess each side of every single fight that you handicap. And there are viable paths to defeat for both fighters here. So this isn't a cakewalk for either fighter. It could look like Kai Kara-France, even if he lands the kill shot in the first minute, people will say, oh yeah, look, he won. But let's be honest with ourselves. The kryptonite for Kai Kara-France is the grappling and the mat, and I could see him potentially getting submitted here, but I'm going to be picking Kai Kara-France via knockout. That's going to be the official prediction.
Okay, there you go. The Flyweight King has spoken, and I have picked the opposite of him on both flyweight fights on this card, unfortunately. Like you mentioned, though, I'm glad you mentioned the bankroll management portion of this. If you're betting, using the standard unit system, a lot of people like to assign a dollar value to a unit. It's supposed to be different for each individual person. It's supposed to be 1% of your total overall bankroll, whatever that happens to be for you. And as you guys know, we don't do the unit shaming thing here. Doesn't matter if you're betting $5, $10, $100. We're all in the same boat. And that, the units are a way that we can compare to each other without actually using dollars. People they overvalue somebody who shows a $1,000 slip. Just because somebody has or comes from money and they swing big doesn't necessarily make them a better than somebody who is betting on a budget and has $5 units. They could be just as knowledgeable and potentially a better gambler and just have less money to spend in that area. So make sure you guys are watching out for the right people. Surround yourself with good ones. Listen to the good ones who understand how to manage their bankrolls properly, and make sure you use that kind of information. Mike, this was an awesome show. This was really fun, man. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this card. Very exciting. Lots of good stuff. And I just had a good time talking with you. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Clint. I know we're about 2 hours in, so we spent a lot of time exchanging dialogue and break down the fights. And I'll be honest, just providing an honest assessment for the viewers, and just gratitude's the word of the day, Clint. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I'm right there with you. Thank you for the time. And if you have, other shows, any place where people can support you or find your content, now's a perfect time for you to go ahead and shout that out. Let people know where they can get you.
Sure. Mike's MMA Picks on Twitter is my main, where I spend a lot of my time. And I honestly, I try to provide an honest, transparent breakdown of every fight that I do. And you can catch me on Fight Mornings on my YouTube channel. I also do work for MMA Oddsbreaker and the All-Star, and just grateful for you and the MMA community in general. It's a passion that I've had for most of my adult life, and looking to continue to do so for years to come. So grateful to be here. Thank you, Clint.
Right there with you. Thank you again, my guy. As always, everybody, the show is brought to you by Pub Sports Radio. Please help us out here. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit the like button on your way out. We're back to our normal schedule. Total Takedown on Thursday. Undefeated Post Weigh-In show will be coming to you on Friday. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that one. It might be a little weird this week again. But you guys know where to find me on Twitter. I'll be posting all my official picks once I make them. So far, none. I haven't actually locked a bet yet in for this card, but I've got a better idea after talking with my guy Mike of what I may or may not be posting. And I just have one comment to leave you on. Just one thought going out the door. My guy, VB, says one last thing. 2023 Clint is not to be played with. And the man is not joking. Good show, guys. Thank you, VB. Appreciate you tuning in and supporting. And thank all the rest of you for showing up here on this holiday and hanging out with us today. Good luck on all your degenerate action. I hope you didn't bet on the Celtics because apparently Tatum broke his ankle and they're getting their asses kicked. So good luck to everybody gambling on non-MMA sports. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon. Let's roll.